Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Today, our guest is Mr. Kenneth Chester Jr. He is the CEO of RoadWorthy Drive Productions, the host of RoadWorthy Drive podcast, and of course, other things. He has a background in automotive journalism, and he hails from Altoona, Iowa, in the United States. Mr. Chester, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Look, I've been interested in talk with you for a while now. I'm so glad that you responded to my invitation. So I want to get right into it. I know that you have a background in journalism. Did you start out working as an automotive journalist?
Oh, heavens, no. To go back a little bit, my four-year degree is actually in accounting.
Huh.
And my goal coming out of college was to go to work in the auto industry. I loved cars from being very small. That didn't quite happen. And I ended up actually going into telecommunications as my first career out of college. And migrated to this because of the downsizing by my company in the late 1980s. I was on a plane thinking about my future and came up with the first of what is now three companies. The first company was an automobile purchase consulting firm, the AutoBuyer Plus Corporation, where I helped local people through the steps of buying a vehicle, because for years, every office had that one guy who knew all about cars. Well, in my office, that was me, and figured out a way to make money from it. Kept working in telecommunications, migrated actually into writing an automotive column as a suggestion from a business acquaintance. I made the pitch to my local newspaper, and ironically enough, the features editor was Gain, and that was the Des Moines Register here in Iowa. And I have my own column by the early 90s. And I did that. I had a Sunday column twice a month. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years. Thought I'd like to go out on my own, start my own automotive news service. Gannett at the time wasn't feeling that, so I launched my own. And at its height before the recession, my content, writing vehicle reviews primarily, taking photography, and having also featuring the work of other writers, both Caucasian and of color, through my news service. We were in 1 out of every 10 daily general interest newspapers in the United States at our height. And that was right before the recession.
Wow, fantastic. I'm glad you mentioned the AutoBuyer Plus Corporation, because I was curious about that. So from what I heard you say, it either was or it is an auto brokerage firm of some sort?
Oh. Well, the state of Iowa takes issue with the word brokerage because it's against law in the state to broker cars. I never did buy or sell a vehicle. I was a consulting service, and it is in the past tense. The internet largely put that company out of business by the late 1990s, and I had transitioned to the Motor News Media Corporation, which was my automobile news service. But what we provided through AutoBuyer Plus, what I provided through AutoBuyer Plus, was basically all the steps in consulting needed if you were going to buy, trade, sell a new or used vehicle. I was the fellow who counseled with you on negotiation, would in fact do the negotiation if you wanted me to, walk you through the steps of what your trade-in was worth, create a strategy for the dealer and where we were in terms of what you wanted to do relative to buying your next vehicle, how much you wanted to pay, how much you wanted to finance, what that rate should be, what your trade-in was worth. We knew all of this. I prepared my clients to have all this knowledge before they ever set foot in a dealership, because I saw too many well-educated people get what I call sheet metal disease. They get into a showroom, fall in love with the shiny sheet metal, and then became putty in the dealer's hands for whatever the dealer wanted to sell them. And they would spend time rationalizing, well, it's only 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 more. If I do this, if I do that, I can make the purchase. No. We came in, the client knew what they wanted, what a fair price was, roughly what their vehicle was worth. It was up to the dealer to lose the deal. And dealers I worked with usually understood it, and we usually made a deal in about 10 minutes. Didn't take all day. So,
well, I can understand, that must have been a very valuable service, because I know from experience, I could have used you at several different times in my life. Okay, so also, what does RoadWorthy Drive Productions do? What's the function of this company?
That's my current company. And it basically rose from the ashes of the Motor News Media Corporation. To back up just a bit, with the recession, the changes in technology, and the decline of newspapers, all of that came together to be the death knell. My company never really recovered from the recession. So basically we started over. And from those ashes came RoadWorthy Drive, which we produce 2 radio shows a week, which we also release the podcast several different ways. I produce the RoadWorthy Drive program, which is 2 standalone hours where I take a very broad definition of mobility and technology. And it's aimed at people who are tech aware, people who realize that transportation as a mode is changing around them, and they want to know a little bit more about how it's changing, what's going on with the vehicle I'm driving, how am I going to get around in the near future, let alone in the distant future? What's up with electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles? What's all this talk about greenhouse gases? Is ethanol any good for my vehicle? We take all of that. Plus, we also talk about personal security, privacy issues, because honestly, any vehicle built from 2011 forward is basically a computer on wheels. It is transmitting and receiving information connected to the internet. You got a hotspot, you got Bluetooth, all of this is, connected. And they want, even now, both Apple and Google, they want you to be connected all the way through your home through the Internet of Things. We've heard the things where Alexa, Cortana, pick one, where you can give it an instruction from your vehicle to start your coffee maker at home, to verbally order something from a store that you're not at yet, on your way from your vehicle. Turn on your oven. Wow. Set the temperature at your home from your vehicle. You could be 100 miles away. So that you got all of that going on. And we talk about all that. And like I said, autonomous vehicles, autonomous trucking, spacecraft, electric commercial aircraft, virtual takeoff and landing vehicles. Basically, like I like to say, if it moves or if it moves you, it's open, it's fair game. We talk about all.
Okay, well, you mentioned autonomous vehicles, so I'm not going to let that pass. Are you confident? I mean, you were in the industry, you write about these things. Are you confident in the use of autonomous vehicles? And if you have concerns, what are some of them?
I am confident. It's going to take time. The invention of the vehicle took time. Took years to make it safe, to the point, and still getting safer. This basically represents a variety of several technologies coming together. Electric vehicles coming together, advanced driver assistance systems technology, which is what autonomous vehicles is based on. A lot of the technology in your car right now are the building blocks for where autonomous vehicles are going. And this is not 20 years from now. We've been seeing autonomous vehicles on streets in various states in test mode and very limited public mode around the world now for 5 or 6 years. Fun fact, the first paid autonomous trucking load happened 6 years ago from Fort Collins, Colorado to Colorado Springs, and the driver just sat there, and that truck drove 120 miles predominantly by itself. And that company got paid for that, the first paid load. So this is not something that's coming in the future. Now, the biggest challenge we have for autonomous vehicles, and to a lesser degree electric vehicles for a different reason, is legislation. We do not have federal level legislation that specifies not the technology, but specifies the performance of that technology so that consumers can evaluate for themselves the different autonomous systems that are coming to market. An autonomous system like your vehicle right now, your motor vehicle is the most regulated piece of machinery that most people interact with every day. And the federal government they cover everything from the order of the gears in your transmission to where the fuel filter, where you put gas in the vehicle, is regulated. Everything is regulated. Even the amount of hydrocarbons that can be evaporated from the car sitting still, not running, is federally mandated. All of it.
Wow.
We need federal standards, not to pick the technology, but to let the public know when you're evaluating different technologies from different manufacturers, of which there are many, using different ways to get to this. What should be the minimum standards for my protection, both physical protection, privacy issues, security issues? What should I expect the system to do at a basic level if it in fact is hacked? And to the federal government's credit, there have been guidelines by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration since 2013 and cybersecurity guidelines for the industry since about 2016, but they're guidelines. They're not federal standards. In other words, I want to know in any system, however they choose to get there, that at night in limited visibility, if there is an object in the dark 100 yards away, the vehicle's moving at 60 miles an hour, what can I expect that vehicle to do? When should it sense it? How should it stop? At what level will the vehicle not operate? How severe does weather get before the vehicle doesn't operate in the interest of my safety? You know, what are the ethical issues that are engineered into the vehicle? And the industry is currently grappling with that. And they get in a kind of a no-win situation. If you're in a situation where you're in a no-win situation, something happens. You have to hit a car full of people or a tree. What do you do?
Yeah.
It's good to know that. What are the standards for that?
Right.
You know, how does that ethical question get answered? How does the software that gets programmed by human beings through deep machine learning and artificial intelligence make those decisions? Somebody had to program. Right. The system had to learn. I want to know. And I think that there's a place for the federal government to stipulate minimum guidelines for the operation of an autonomous vehicle across all 50 states that consumers, whether they're in Maine or Hawaii, knows that when they are reviewing and assessing whether or not an autonomous vehicle is the right vehicle for them, they have some basis in fact that is consistent across everything to go by.
Right. Okay. So along those lines, what's your sense of where legislation is going in regards to liability? That is the driver always liable for the function of his vehicle? Well, I'm not sure the driver is always liable today with the function of the vehicle, but you see my point. So, so in terms of liability, if a driver, even if it's not 100% autonomous, but there's the driver can take a nap and come back in control, who is responsible if there is a collision or something? Or is it the manufacturer? Is it
a couple of points?
Okay.
The automobile insurance industry estimates that with the full implementation of autonomy across everything, and it usually takes 20 years for a new feature or standard to be introduced into the private fleet. And there are 250 million privately owned vehicles in the United States right now, as for a benchmark. At the point of full implementation, they expect vehicle premiums to drop, income from vehicle premiums to drop 90%.
Wow. They
also expect that by that time, insurance will go from a crash accident incident situation to a product liability issue. Because remember, at full implementation, there is no driver. You are fully dependent at level 5 for the system to operate as intended, as designed, hence federal standards. Now, today, regardless of what state you're in, it does not matter. In all 50 states, the person behind the wheel is fully responsible for the control and operation of that motor vehicle. Full stop. We've got to get from where we are now to product liability then, and it's not going to be a clean transition. I think that there are some, and in fact, there's a couple working its way through the courts. We were actually reported on that last week on one of my programs where we talked about liability relative to insurance, relative to a case where a Tesla Model X approaching a toll booth accelerated not due to the driver's control, crashed into the toll booth and injured the toll collector. They're in court right now. Semi-autonomous, and I believe it was either a 2018 or 2019 Tesla Model X. That's working its way through the court system right now. The point being is that Tesla was faulty that even though it had what we call automatic emergency braking systems, there was no fail-safe in the vehicle to prevent the vehicle from going to full acceleration with an object defined as a hard, unmovable, stationary object in front of it. The system should have known that and overrode the order. The woman driving the vehicle did not either intend or otherwise operate the vehicle in such a way to cause it to accelerate in such a manner.
Wow.
So that is happening right now in real time.
Wow, that's amazing. So along those lines, you mentioned, well, before I get to that, is an autonomous motorized vehicle analogous to an airplane today being on autopilot? Because I've heard about, planes, pilots putting the planes on autopilot and the plane kind of flies itself.
Well, it's an interesting question you would ask that. My late dad was a master aircraft technician for a commercial airline. And we used to talk about stuff like that when he was still working. And I can take you back 20 years to answer the question about a commercial aircraft. Well, let me back up. I think Tesla's use of autopilot is unfortunate because it suggests full automation, which it's not. And every system now somehow requires you to keep your hands on the wheel, although you've seen YouTube videos and TikTok videos of people gaming the system so the system thinks there's a hand on the wheel, and you see some ridiculous foolishness. That goes to liability, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not the same, because autopilot within certain parameters, particularly the most dangerous times, is landing and takeoff. Okay. The pilot still has to have a level of expertise and certification to take over, unlike your average driver who doesn't. So you're looking at a very technical piece of equipment with a specific application, as opposed to autonomy or level 5 full autonomy, as opposed to level 4, which is conditional autonomy, which means, and the difference between those two, it's autonomous within certain parameters, either geofence parameters or certain highways, or under certain situations, where full autonomy is just that, full autonomy. Ironically enough, the biggest challenge for the industry now is because there are so many variables in the average driver, human behavior, whether it be human behavior behind the wheel or out in the street, a pedestrian, a motorist, cyclist, etc., and a multitude of things that can happen. City, rural, exurban, suburban, a multitude of things they have to plan for, which ironically is why you'll see autonomous trucking before you see full-scale level 5 autonomous driving for personal vehicles. So I hesitate to say they're the same, because in a lot of ways they are not.
Understood. Okay. You mentioned hacking earlier, and I'm glad you mentioned that word, because some movies suggest that, railroad, cars, like, what I mean, subway systems, buses, all are subject to hacking because of the electronics in those vehicles. So from your standpoint, is hacking a vehicle a real possibility as we move forward?
In 2015, now Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, became the first automaker to issue a recall because of potential compromise in their infotainment system. Wow. That was a federal level recall. They were the first automaker that had a vulnerability through the infotainment system. Another area that is vulnerable is what they call the OBD Port, which was originally created in the late 1990s for emissions diagnostics. A lot of these other systems, like you've seen the, plug this in and we can gauge your insurance and give you better insurance, plugs into that port. It's those third-party systems, ironically enough, like the insurance company systems or other systems that plug into that port that pose the greatest risk to potential system compromising. Today, for the most part, can a system be hacked? Yes, it can. Can it be hacked to the point of, and I'm thinking that you're thinking of one of the Fast and Furious movies where they hacked a bunch of vehicles and sent them into the street and it was all kinds of crazy. Yeah, no. You, for a lot of these vehicles, you literally have to be next to the vehicle to do it.
I see.
What the original guidelines by NHTSA discussed was like layers of an onion. In terms of, okay, you might get into the system at some low-level system, but you're not going to get to the core systems, and we're going to shut down or go into limp hole mode if we've discovered that you are in fact in this system before you can cause real damage, and you can't necessarily override those systems to cause real harm. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? Yes. I'm thinking of a gentleman that we talked about on the air had found a vulnerability in certain Tesla models and was able to control a number of Teslas. He didn't do anything serious. He reached out to the company, but it was doable. Will this always be a challenge? As long as you have human beings on the planet with nothing better to do, they will always look for a way to beat a system. So I don't think there is nothing that is 100% hack proof. That, I mean, short of the Department of Defense, which is about as unhackable as you can get, but can you be hacked? Yeah. I think the issue that NHTSA is looking at and pursuing with the industry, one, any internet or third-party things that can be plugged in or otherwise interface with your vehicle be as robust as the core vehicle electronics itself, number one. Number two, to have these vehicles have a mode that even if it is in fact hacked, have both the ability to detect it, the ability to isolate it, and the ability to go into some kind of limp home mode or disabling mode should it determine that it has been compromised. Rather than try to run, it will probably shut down, pull over, stop, or something like that.
That's amazing in itself that a vehicle could have some defenses built into it. Wow. But I want to get into electric vehicles, but before I do that, I want to take you back over 20 years ago when I became more aware of, let's call them small auto manufacturers. Maybe they were not small, but I thought of them as small. I'm talking about Hyundai, Kia, Mitsubishi, those kinds of manufacturers. And at first, my reaction to a Hyundai was that it wasn't as good as an American-made car until I bought one. I had a good experience with a Hyundai. So what is also, let me also say this. I remember renting a Hyundai Genesis. I didn't go in looking for Genesis. I went in looking for a luxury car when I made my appointment. And the luxury car that they gave me was a Hyundai Genesis. I was so disappointed. So my question to you is, what is the status of these manufacturers today? Maybe they're not small anymore because obviously some beautiful cars like this. How are they doing? Hyundai, Kia, Mitsubishi, how do they compete? Yeah.
That is a long, involved question you just asked. So let me unpack first of all.
Okay.
Direct, Hyundai's not that small. Hyundai Motors is actually part of a big conglomerate of all sorts of things in South Korea. Hyundai currently, their vehicle, their Sonata, passed the Honda Accord in overall quote back in 2004. Hyundai has factories throughout the South right now, in Alabama, Kia in Georgia. In fact, the Kia plant is so modern, the History Channel did a special on it when it opened. And I believe it's West Plains or West Point. I always get that confused. And I believe that the distance between the Georgia plant for Kia and the Hyundai plant, which are the same company, by the way, in Montgomery, is 85 miles. They have stamping plants, parts plants. Yeah, Hyundai is one of the largest manufacturers in the world, and they have Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. To give you an idea, in comparison, Over the next 5 years, the Hyundai Group plans to spend $87 billion in electric and autonomous vehicles. GM and Ford, $30 billion each. Nissan, $18 billion. Just to give you a comparison, Ford just recently doubled again their commitment to electric vehicles. They're up now around $50 billion. To answer your question about Mitsubishi, Mitsubishi actually is the poor sister that got rescued, ironically, by the combination of Renault and Nissan. Had they not been rescued, Mitsubishi would not probably be in the vehicle business today. But again, Mitsubishi is also a global conglomerate of many different industries, from shipping to steel to home appliances. Mitsubishi Motors, one small piece of it, just like the Hyundai Group. Because Nissan invested and now owns 30% of the company, they were pulled into the Nissan, what is now considered the Nissan, Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Combine, and their new Eclipse, which has fingerprints of the Nissan Rogue all over it. Best Mitsubishi they've ever built in at least 20 years. And they couldn't have gotten there without the help of the conglomerate they're now a part of. So that probably saved them. They did have a plant in Normal, Illinois at one time that is now ironically repurposed as an electric truck plant. It is the main plant for Rivian. And that plant was built in the late 1980s, early 1990s as a joint venture between Chrysler and Mitsubishi, at that time known as Diamond Star Motors. Mitsubishi bought Chrysler out in the mid 1990s, and that became the basis for their Project America initiative. But unfortunately, the industry turned. Mitsubishi didn't have the wherewithal to stick with it, and their product line dramatically shrunk to the point where if Nissan and Renault had not helped them out, they probably, at least in America, would not exist anymore.
Wow. So do those cars compare well to, let's say, American cars, or even, some
Define American.
Well, that's another question.
What does that mean today?
Yeah, I'll go in there with you in a minute. But what I'm saying is that, like a Chrysler or even a Camry, in terms of reliability and safety,
it matches or beats them, and they have a better warranty. They have a better warranty than Lexus.
Okay.
Right now, if you walk into a Hyundai dealer, it's 10 years on the powertrain, 10 years on everything else, 5 years roadside assistance, unlimited mileage. Kia is 6 years. And they've got plants. The Sonata is American made, right there in Montgomery, Alabama. So is the Elantra. So is the, let's see, their Tucson is, their Santa Fe is. They just came out with a little truck called the Santa Cruz, which is also made here in America. Yeah. But let me turn things around.
Okay.
Do you know who the #1 exporter of vehicles from America is? You should, because it's right in your backyard.
Hyundai.
No.
Not Hyundai. Okay.
Nope.
If it's not Hyundai, then I would say Kia.
No.
They
don't
have
have American plants, but no.
Which one?
BMW.
BMW, that's right. BMW. What am I thinking?
They export more vehicles. They last year during the pandemic, they exported over $10 billion, almost 300,000 vehicles to 120 countries from the United States, including Germany.
Wow.
It's an interesting, ironic turn of events that an American-made BMW is being sold in Germany, their home country. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute, because I thought it was wonderfully ironic. We covered that last week in my program too.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And I should have known that, because a friend of mine consulted at the BMW plant with some of their employees. Yeah.
In fact, also in your backyard is Volvo, and they moved their production from China. And the Volvo S60 is built here in the United States. And I've driven both the Chinese-made and the American-made S60. You cannot tell a difference in overall quality. They're both the same. They're both very good.
Is that good for our economy or not so good for our, some people would say that's not good for our economy, because
anytime you can bring American jobs here, where American workers are paying American taxes and all the money that flows. Example, I was at Nissan's Canton, Mississippi plant the day it opened in 2004. I interviewed the mayor of Canton, Mississippi. I got to talk to him, and he talked to me about, even though that plant sits in Madison County, in the county out of town, that the inflow of Nissan money basically changed his entire town. His downtown, which was boarded up, is no longer boarded up, lots of small shops. Nissan paid at that time $150,000 a year to the school system in town, which made all the difference in the world. They told me in Mississippi's 82 counties, when that plant opened in 2004, it employed, I wanted to say 2,500 workers. They paid the highest wages in the state. They anticipated that when it got to full strength, 5,000 workers in Canton, Mississippi, that it would pull people from every single county in the state, paying the highest wages in all of Mississippi.
Wow. Yeah, I spent some time in a plant close to Columbus in Mississippi. Yeah, but some people still say, though, buy American, and they don't see a Nissan as an American. I mean, I've heard that. That's
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Toyota has a sprawling assembly plant in Georgetown, Kentucky, has for almost 40 years. Honda's been in Ohio, namely East Liberty and Marysville, for 40 years. Nissan's plant in Smyrna, Tennessee, also early 1980s. Hyundai since 2006. Both Mercedes has a plant in Alabama. Volvo has a plant, I believe, in South Carolina. BMW's plant in Spartanburg. Kia's plant in Georgia. If you can't buy, I mean, and then you turn around. So you think a Chevy Silverado is actually American made? If I told you it was made in Mexico, would you believe me? Or Canada?
I would believe you.
Some are.
Right. Well,
Some
yeah.
are, and particularly the heavy trucks.
Right.
Are.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's more of a global economy now, anyway, so that's limited thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just lay the groundwork for you.
Okay.
So people will understand. The average vehicle consists of 15,000 parts. The average vehicle program is anywhere from 700 to 2,000 suppliers. Everything from the little fasteners and the glue they use, to the steel they stamp, to the equipment they use to make the vehicles. It's been global. It always will be. Ironically, the Commerce Department issues a report every year that talks about American content. That is because of a law in the late 1990s. I believe it's the American Automotive Labeling Act. And I don't see it so much anymore, but for many years, your window sticker had to identify final assembly, where the engine was made, where the transmission was made. Unfortunately, it doesn't include where the labor is put in. Labor is not necessarily included for the overall assembly, which is really too bad. And ironically, the vehicles that win with the highest American content as defined, and the law is a little wishy-washy because it includes Canada too. That was a olive leaf olive branch that they gave to the American manufacturers who complained, our Canadian operations are so intertwined, we can't break it out. The vehicles that consistently finish high, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, in terms of American content.
Wow. Understood. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have several more questions, but I think we're going to run out of time. Let me get to a couple of them. In terms of electric vehicles, and this could be an idiotic question, but I'm sure people would want to know. Can you charge those cars at home with a 110? You can? There's no special. Okay.
No. Absolutely not. Now, understand that it's called a level 3 charger. You can charge at home without the special charger, but you're looking at what they call a trickle charge, or a slow charge of 8 to 12 hours. But it can be done.
All right. So driving down the highway, will the car tell a driver where charging stations are located? Or
there are many apps that are now available that will do it. Tesla has a whole country full of their superchargers. In fact, even out here in Iowa, there's a supercharger bank for Tesla vehicles less than 3 miles from where I live.
Okay.
And right now, under the President's Infrastructure Act, they're building out a network of hundreds of thousands of chargers in the next 3 to 5 years. It'll be a moot point soon.
Okay. So drivers don't have to be nervous about where do I get a charge?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So how long does it take to charge a fully electric automobile?
Kind of depends on the vehicle, and it
Okay.
kind of depends on the available charger. There are 3 levels of charge. There's level 3, which is the trickle charge we talked at home. There's what I call the first generation public chargers, which are level 2. They don't take as long as the home chargers, but they still take a lot longer than most people like. Then there are what we call the level 3 or the fast chargers. Now, for the fast chargers, your vehicle has to be designed to accept it because the fast charging, as configured now, generates a lot of heat. And unless you have a high voltage system, like a lot of the new vehicles coming to market now, you're not able to really partake of those fast chargers. The Teslas can. And on the other vehicles, really is kind of hit or miss. Not all of them can take that. The new vehicles come to market will be able to. And that will probably get you down to 20, 30 minutes to get 80% of your charge.
Okay. Okay.
And where they're going now, they expect to get that down to 5 to 10 minutes to get a full charge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's great. 5 to 10 minutes. Wow. Okay. So the average person, I'm the average person. Electric vehicles, I'm anticipating the price of automobiles to go up, right or wrong?
Wrong.
Okay.
2023, the General Motors Corporation is going to introduce a fully electric Chevy Equinox. Okay. Now, full disclosure, I own a 2018, I bought used. I have the sticker for what this thing costs new. It's a mid-range Equinox. It's about 29 grand, front drive, decently equipped, but not a premium luxury Equinox with all the bells and whistles. GM said that they will introduce a fully electric, all new Equinox for 2023. That's next year, at the price that somebody buying my vehicle new in 2018 would have paid, $29,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
Let
okay.
that set.
Yeah. Now, another question from the average person. Electric vehicles, high-tech vehicles, it's going to cost a lot to repair them.
Are you kidding? Your average internal combustion engine has 600 parts. Your average EV motor has 20. There's nothing to break. There's no fluids. There's no oil changes. There's nothing to go wrong.
Wow.
And with battery technology accelerating the way it is and a whole bunch of different approaches, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something called battery swapping, which we talked about last week on my program, actually, that you might see the rise of what we call batteries as a service. You don't buy the batteries, you rent them. That will drop the price of an electric vehicle by $10,000.
Wow. Wow. On that same podcast, when you talked about battery swapping, because when I wanted to ask you about that, you also said something about dealerships don't want your cash. What do you mean by that?
In today's world, right now, 85% of all deals are financed at the dealer, but still about 20% are paid for in cash. And right now, because the dealer is trying to maximize every opportunity, they would rather give you a loan and make the commission on that loan, which is pretty healthy, than take your money. They don't want you to pay cash if they can help it because they don't make any additional money on it. And everybody in the industry knows the money doesn't get made selling you a new car. It's all the services they sell. And it's selling used cars, and selling parts and service. That is where a new car dealer makes their money. They don't really make it selling a new car. Oh,
there's a lot here. Well, Mr. Chester, thank you for spending time with me today. I have more questions, but I'll have to bring you back because
I'm glad to come back.
I haven't even I haven't gotten reviews of certain electric cars, like the Cadillac, for example, and others. So we got to bring you back at some point. But you've certainly opened my eyes, and I'm certain that many of the people who see you or hear you on this podcast will have learned a lot as well. So thank you so much for your time today. One last thing, though, is there anything else you care to share with us that I have not asked you today?
Oh my.
Anything that's hot for you.
There is so much. I'll end it like this, because I can't even begin to cover it. I spend more time excluding stuff to cover my shows every week than I can include. I don't have enough time. I can tell the people who watch your podcast that there is so much going on and it's speeding up. Used to be that technological changes were not necessarily inclusive to mobility. Pretty much anything happening now, if it's technologically based, anything I can tie to mobility. Wow. So the only thing I can encourage them to do that you didn't do, I will do. If they want to go to my website, roadworthydrive.net, that will connect them. If they're looking for our podcast, either Roadworthy Drive or Roadworthy Drive Moments, they're available pretty much anywhere you get a podcast. But if you can't find it, roadworthydrive.buzzsprout.com will get you there.
Great. Please send those links to me and I will put them in the description wherever this podcast appears. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. Our guest today has been Mr. Kenneth Chester from RoadWorthy Productions. Thank you for listening and watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.